for listening to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in American soccer. And don't forget to subscribe.
Welcome back to Uncle Sam's American Soccer Podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to go back and listen to myself, Steven Jodrin, and our guest, Joseph Lowery, talking about the U.S. men's national team training camp, the U.S. men's national team as a whole. You can follow me on Twitter at Armand Kafai. You can follow Steven Jodrin at Twitter at Steven Jodrin. And you can follow Joseph Lowery, our special guest from The Athletic, on Twitter at Joe and Cleats. Let's jump into the episode. So we just got done talking about the U.S. men's national team in our last episode. Now we're going to talk about everyone's favorite league. Come on. You guys got to stay with me.
All right.
Say Major League Soccer. Come on. One, two, three.
Indian Super League.
Major League Soccer.
Oh my God, what the? Indian Super League? You don't even watch the Indian Super League.
I have.
You've never watched the Indian Super League.
Yes, I have.
No, you haven't.
I've watched 2 minutes.
You've watched probably 2 minutes, yeah, on ESPN Plus, because you're bored like 6 a.m.
Yeah,
because I've done the same thing.
There you go.
I think we all have.
It's not good soccer. But
on a side note, guys, where does Major League Soccer rank as far as the world leagues?
Wow, you're really throwing a question like that, like right off the bat, man.
No, but has it changed the last couple of years, or are we still bubbling on the same as it was 3 or 4 years ago?
Oh, it's changed. I mean, come on. With a team like Atlanta United coming in with their fun, entertaining football, their loud crowd, and the players that are now coming to MLS is definitely changed perception-wise.
I think perception-wise, it probably is starting to change. I'm not convinced on the whole it's necessarily risen a whole lot in terms of other leagues, but I'm optimistic that it is slowly changing and definitely will rise.
I think you're right there. I think on the club level, like individual clubs, it's completely different from Atlanta to Colorado to the Revs to LAFC to Seattle and TFC. Like, every club is on its own level, and it's discussion for another day. I thought I'd throw that out there since we're talking about the Indian Super League. Now, listeners, we're chatting about the philosophy of MLS draft, and then we're going to get into a different philosophical issue of FC Dallas versus the Atlanta United model. So we'll talk about that, but let's get to the draft. Now, Armand, you have really awesome feelings about MLS draft, don't you?
I hate MLS draft, but I think yesterday, we're recording this on Thursday? So on Wednesday, we saw a trade happen between the Philadelphia Union and FC Cincinnati. The Union, basically, Union Sporting Director Ernst Tanner came in, went to the combine, and said, "Yeah, we're not going to get any of the guys. We only think 2 or 3 guys are going to really be good for developmental purposes. So we're not going to pick." And he traded all their draft picks to FC Cincinnati for a grand total of $150,000 in general allocation money, or as we call it, GAM on this show. They had a 13th overall pick, and then some other irrelevant picks in there. And Tanner was quoted in I'm referring to the article on Pro Soccer USA. You can read my stuff there as well. Sorry, I had to throw a plug in there. I had to. He said the level of MLS has increased a lot, and I think that the level at the universities has been more or less the same. There's quite a big gap. Out of what I've seen, there are a lot of players who are quite okay for the USL level, but doesn't make us better in MLS. I think Steven, Jake, and I had a good discussion about this off the mic, and I'll bring it to you. Bring it to y'all in a second. But Joseph, what do you think of the draft as a whole? It seems like it's losing relevance year in and year out. We're hearing reports that values for draft picks are lowering. I think a value for a draft pick last year was around 6 digits, but the Union traded all their picks for $150,000 in general allocation money. So it seems to have gone down a little bit. But overall, do you think the draft's a good asset for teams to utilize?
Honestly, no, not really. I think Tanner kind of has it right here. There's not the level of players that are being drafted are not necessarily Major League Soccer level. And I don't think anyone expects them necessarily to be at that level right away. But, for a team like the Union, what's the motivation for them to draft players when they have a USL team that they can, filter their academy guys through, or assign players that they can assign from a wider pool of players that they can bring in? I mean, I don't know what the motivation is for them to get all excited about the draft when they have other resources that they can use that are maybe even more functional.
Doesn't this illustrate the problem within U.S. soccer structure? That here's MLS, this up-and-coming league growing. Now it has surpassed the college ranks, well past college ranks, in the point that it's almost insignificant, meaningless. So if you're a youngster, you can't get into an MLS academy. What do? You go to college. Well, if you can't go pro, what are you doing, right? So MLS has a really tough task on what to do. But this is a broader issue, is what's the college game even worth anymore? If the coaching, if the development of players there are so putrid that it's USL level, then just make the draft USL based, and you allow MLS teams to start buying for some money for USL. So you create a market for players, and you allow youngsters to go get professional experience, but you allow MLS to do their own thing. Maybe this is, tinfoil Ted here.
Looking at the draft, I mean, I've spoken to people who do play collegiate soccer, who have played collegiate soccer, and they tell me how it's not necessarily the coaching, but it's the scheduling that's brutal on them. Playing 2 games a week is pretty tough on a lot of these guys because A, they're not pros, and B, they have to, and they need to impress. So, sitting out with an injury may not be an option for some of these guys because they want to improve their stock, and they'll play through injury, and that just hampers them later on in their career. The draft, I think, coaching wise, there is some value there. I know many people have talked great about their college coaches, but I think it's just a format that's just really bad and really brutal on the body. And it makes people. I know a guy, D1 player, doesn't want to play pro. That shouldn't be an expectation. I mean, I feel like you should always have the aspiration to go pro, but he just says no, I don't want to go pro. I mean, college game is kind of my knees hurt, everything hurts. Like, I don't know if I want to play. It's stuff like that. And the college game itself, MLS teams are punting on a draft now. I think Montreal traded all their picks last year, and now the Union have done it as well. Look, I said this to Steven multiple times. If you're not a GA player, if I was a GM, I would only draft Generation Ideas players. They don't go against they don't count as a cap hit, basically. And also, you know what? If they don't work out because they're not a cap hit, all right, doesn't affect your cap, doesn't affect your spending. Who cares? Move on. And they're the best players. They're probably gonna be the best players available in this draft. Which is why, carrying on to another topic or another conversation, I don't think Philadelphia or the Cincinnati made the right deal in acquiring these late round, first round picks. These usually don't pan out as much. If you go top 5, top 8, top 10, you have a higher success rate. But these later ones, okay, you're filling out your roster, but so what? Half these guys don't develop, and they're usually just really poor. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents in the draft and how it's kind of just depreciating. The combine is going to go away. Like, what are we actually valuing here? I think the draft should be 2 rounds deep. And I think Stevie made a good point. Make the rest of the draft made for the USL. Make the USL draft. I think there's an Indiana player who actually went straight to the USL and didn't return for college. Let them develop there.
I think looking at college, the college game is not set up in an optimal way to develop players. I mean, what we talked about, you talked about, Armand, the physical difficulties and the grind that it puts on your body. And how many months does the season span? 3-4 months?
I think it's shorter. It's like a little. Is it a little shorter or a little?
It might be shorter than that. I mean,
yeah.
But so if we assume that it's a couple months long, where players around the rest of the world, or players even in America who aren't playing in the college game, are playing 10, 11 months out of the year. So, I mean, the fact that we look at the draft now and we're questioning it is a good thing. How do we expect players to come out of college and be professional level players? It's not realistic. So I think we're going to see less and less emphasis from MLS teams on the draft, and we're also going to see fewer and fewer top talents going to college and playing there.
No, you're right, Joseph. So, I mean, this is exactly my point. College game does not develop anybody. So what's the point of MLS putting stock into it? So MLS has a tough task here ahead trying to figure out, but there's USL, and USL has rebranded itself. So why not allow the D3 leagues or the D2, or sorry, the second and third league within USL to get some of these college players at a younger age. And then you start to build a market and you allow these players to grow. I mean, what is the philosophy of USL for, especially in the third, or was it? So you have USL, the championship, and League One, right? Am I getting it confused now?
Yeah, Championship, League One, League Two.
League Two
is more amateur, yeah.
League Two, allow these colleges to come into League Two, and then maybe League One says, "Oh, that's a good player," and then you get into USL, and maybe MLS takes a flyer on a young guy or a cheap guy. There is no market structure within U.S. soccer allow players to move up like you see in other leagues where, we all know the famous story of Jamie Vardy, but even N'Golo Kanté, where did he come from? Was the second division Ligue 2 in France.
I think specifically they should just make a USL draft. And I think you're right, Steven. Make a USL draft and go and go from there. But there's going to have to be more investment in USL for a player to say, hey, look, I'm willing to make 20, 25K a year over like what I can make graduating with a degree. And that's the big issue, right? We saw Brandon Vincent retire at a young age. He had a Stanford degree. I think it was like 24. We've seen a lot of players now retire. I think it was a couple of FC Dallas guys. I can't remember their names. I think Timo Pitter and something Bonner. I forgot his name. He had a really good Instagram name that one time. Yeah, his Instagram name was Raging Bonner. So if that's any great top five Instagram names I've ever seen one, and the MLS page put it on there. I just can't remember his first name, but these guys retire and they make more money with their college degrees. So there has to be more investment into USL before I think players are like, oh, hey, I'm going to take that risk or something like that, because it's not sustainable, right, to be honest with you, to play in that league for as long as they do.
Last thoughts, Joseph.
Yeah, I was going to say.
No, I think we're basically all on the same page here. I think USL continuing to develop and get more exposure will help provide an alternative for college players, because I mean we see it happening right now. The MLS draft is being devalued by the teams that do the drafting. So I think USL is a very good option. Or we could revitalize the college game and give them a 9-month schedule, but we all know that's not going to happen. So yeah, it's a tough situation.
So let's talk about another philosophical difference. And I think Steven is really excited to talk about this.
Yes.
I know Joseph might be as well, but I think his excitement was all used for the U.S. men's national team segment. It's a philosophy between FC Dallas and Atlanta United. And specifically these two, I think a quote popped up to me and Steven. He was Luchi Gonzalez, the new head coach at FC Dallas. I actually have a couple interviews with him on Pro Soccer USA. I got to plug it again. The FC Dallas quota, you know how it is.
We've maxed that quota.
Yeah, we've maxed that quota. He spoke about, using the academy to win championships and sell young players. He says to Extra Time Radio, FC Dallas has a unique opportunity to use the academy to both win championships and sell young players, just like the best clubs in Portugal, Holland, Belgium, and Croatia do. There isn't one way to win MLS. It doesn't have to be development or winning. We believe we can do both. Now, the Atlanta United method seems to be a lot different. They seem to buy up and coming South American players, put them in their on their squad, and spend lots of money. So there's a huge debate between, hey, can you develop to win, or do you buy and develop that already developed talent to win. I think it's a really interesting dynamic.
Yes, Armand, perfect. This leads to my question. When is the last time an MLS winner, name it, Joseph or Armand, or just tweet us, Unc Sam Soccer Pod, that won based on the academy? Because quite frankly, I haven't seen that. And we can go through the list if you want.
Yeah, I can pull up the list.
I mean,
But-
do we count this past season's Red Bulls as winning or as using their academy to get them at least to a supporters shield? That's a genuine question. I don't know.
I think yes, you can. That's a good point. But let's just.
But no, we're talking about no. But here, the way I think about it is this, and my mentality has changed. I used to think the supporters shield had a meaning. No one cares. The MLS Cup or bust.
That's fair. That's fair.
Armand has finally made the walk of faith to my side. Welcome,
here's
buddy.
The thing. I mean,
Welcome.
when you look through just the history, and you see a team, no one talks about the Red Bulls being supporters shield, and this is being someone in the MLS media.
Yep.
We care, but
3
no
and
one
6
talks about
years.
it, and no one cares. No one
3
cares.
and 6 years.
It's
3.
the Red Bulls always choke when they go to MLS Cup or MLS playoffs. That's what we talk about. No one talks about the whole supporters shield. That's crap.
All right. But so Atlanta this past year, they spent. Toronto in 2017, they spent. How about Seattle in 2016? They spend. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Portland in 2015, 2-1 win over Columbus. They spent money. Correct?
Yeah.
2014 LA Galaxy versus the Revs. Both clubs spent money.
Was that the Jermaine Jones game?
Yep.
When Jermaine Jones spent. Yep.
So you can go on through the list. I'm sorry, but the last 5 years, what team has won on academy? What team has developed a team to go on to win? Now, selling players to make money is one thing. We just saw FC Dallas make a wonderful deal. Yet he had not contributed a single second to MLS or FC Dallas in on the field play or even, anything like that. Yeah, sure, they made money, but I think going after young players and developing through the academy is a lot more difficult in MLS than it is in Portugal, Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, Croatia, all these smaller nations.
And can I jump in? I think I agree with you, Stephen. Why is it more difficult for a team like FC Dallas, as an example, to develop talent and compete for a championship than teams in the Netherlands or teams in Portugal and Belgium, etc.? What makes it more challenging?
That's a great question.
My guess is this: you're not going to keep that talent for long, right? So you're not unless you do not play the guys. You're not like, for example, Paxton Pomacall, etc. He has not been playing much, so he's not really on the radar of specific teams. But as soon as a guy starts playing, Reggie Cannon played one season, he's on the radar. He had offers from teams this past season, and you want to know why? Because they're cheap, undervalued talent. This is why we speak about this quote unquote market inefficiency that I've kind of coined. That these American-based talents they're not valued as high on the transfer market, and they're cheap, and teams are starting to take notice. So what happens if a player does well after one or two seasons? He's gone. Is that ample enough time to develop a player for a championship-winning team?
Armand, I think you're overstating it. If this were the case, we'd see a lot more players fleeing MLS. It would be the Brazilian league where players are leaving halfway through the season. But
here's the thing: they're cheap, undervalued talent, right? But they still need more time to show that they're cheap, undervalued talent. If that makes sense, because the perception of American players is kind of meh.
Right, but
if that makes any sense.
But I think that's one point. I think there's also the coaching dynamic, because I read interview after interview, and God, who was it? Now, I'm drawing a blank, but one of the players was basically telling, I don't remember where I read this, so forgive me, was saying that the coaches worry too much about the results. What are they playing for?
Hey, that was my interview, baby. That was my interview.
Was it Cannon?
Yeah, it was. I'll pull it up while you talk about it.
All right, but Cannon there was basically saying that there's too much focus on the result that they don't get the opportunity to play the young kids. And then but then how's that possible that they do that in Europe? And you're playing for Champions League, Europa League football, but when you lose, there's the potential possibility of relegation. That doesn't exist in MLS. So the excuses of not playing young kids in MLS is what?
So, do you want me to read the Cannon quote for you?
Sure.
He goes, I think in Europe, if they see potential in you, they'll give you a chance. But in MLS, I feel like we got to get these 3 points this weekend, and whatever is going to make that happen, we're going to do it. They may not play the kids that are ready, and I think it's hindering some of them, and that's why kids are going to Europe. I think MLS has gotten a lot better at it, especially FC Dallas. I mean, we're playing a 20-year-old every single game. I think MLS is getting a lot better, and I think FC Dallas kind of shaped that model, but I just got to tell the kids in the league it's actually worth it. And that's what Kenan said to me.
And why? It's such an interesting perspective. Why shouldn't MLS be the league where you can play your kids? There's no relegation. The Rapids aren't getting relegated. The Earthquakes aren't getting relegated.
Exactly.
Why are teams this is just my constant question. Why are teams so hesitant to play the Paxton Palmacals or, to play the Bucios, to play the Bellows? It boggles my mind, because if you dropped a couple points, oh no. There's little risk, basically, from my perspective. Yeah, it's a results-driven league still. Coaches want to win, players want to win. The best players are going to be the ones out there on the field, but I'm not convinced that it's an impossible model for FC Dallas and Luchi Gonzalez to implement. They have a better academy infrastructure than a lot of other teams in the league do, and they are producing talent. I mean, we saw it at the CONCACAF U20 championships with Cervania and Palmacal sort of bossing the field, at least from my perspective. So I think the infrastructure is starting to appear. Some clubs are farther along than others, but whether it's whether you can win with the philosophy, whether you can win an MLS Cup with the philosophy, I'm not sure we'll find out the actual answer to that within the next few years. I think it could take several years for us to get a solid answer to that question, but I'm excited to see what FC Dallas are going to look like. And I think if you produce the talent and you play the talent and it is genuine talent, I don't see why you couldn't win games with it.
So I think Armand, you alluded to this. If you think about the European leagues, Belgium, Croatia, Switzerland, Portugal, so on, and go through the list, players, if these clubs play the youngsters, you can make a pretty penny off them. In MLS, you're getting crap, right? So if FC Dallas is producing these talents now, like say a Tyler, even with the Red Bulls, they're not getting near as much as if these players were the same age playing at the equivalent of that club in Europe. Like, I always wonder, what would Chris Richards cost a club in, say, Belgium for Bayern Munich? Would he have costed them $3 or $4 million versus the 1.5 that FC Dallas got?
And that's the thing. It's undervalued thing. So when a player is going to come up and is reaching, because a lot of these players that come in kind of raw and they work and then they work their way up with experience. I mean, Cannon didn't come in and boom off the scenes immediately. It was like, wow, this guy's amazing. No, he worked his way and developed confidence going up and down the pitch. And that's when we started talking about, oh wow, Reggie Cannon might be one of the best right backs in MLS. That's when we started talking about these things. Not from the get-go. So it takes time for these guys to develop. And I don't think we've even seen the best of Reggie Cannon just yet. And as soon as that happens, they're gone. And they're gone because they're cheap.
Yeah,
no. That's the most important thing.
But the juxtaposition with Atlanta is not like Atlanta's going out there and signing 50 million players. They're still signing young players hoping to make a pretty penny off of them. So the philosophies aren't necessarily all that different. What is unique is Atlanta spends the money to bring in young talent from South America. FC Dallas is looking within. And obviously FC Dallas has had some sort of success over the course of the last couple seasons, but it's always caught them short. Atlanta, I think, maybe learned their first year, and that was ultimately got them over the top this past season, where they won MLS Cup. So I think Joseph, you're completely correct in the sense that we don't really know which philosophy is going to go further or is going to be more successful in the long run. I would really like to see a team really invest in their youth, hold on to them, and then be an Ajax where, they suddenly cause a stir in MLS where they, this team out of nowhere gets pretty far in MLS, not because they spent the money or they have these veteran players, because they got, 20, 25-year-olds playing consistently, and there's 7 or 8 of them that you'd be like, wow, this player could go here, that player can go there. He's potential MVP, blah, blah, blah. Let's see that progress.
And I'd love to see that sort of thing. While you were making that point, I sort of realized maybe that another issue with there being an Ajax type team in MLS is, you were saying, let's get the 24, 25-year-olds out there and playing. And by the time that just using Paxton Pomykal as an example, by the time that Paxton Pomykal is 24, do we actually think he'll still be in MLS? And I guess this kind of goes back to what Armand was saying.
Exactly.
The players aren't sticking around, and partially it's because we're pushing them to go other places, right? We want Tyler Adams to go to Leipzig. We want Weston McKennie to leave FC Dallas's academy and go play for Schalke's U19s and then for the first team. So it's like we want both things, but we can't have both things, at least right now.
But I do think we haven't seen enough players make the move yet. We see them sprinkle. It's starting to sprinkle. The question is, when's the heavy pour coming? Because that's following. The next couple of years, I think you'll just see more and more and more, right? I mean, just think about the last 2 weeks of news, how many players were in between going to Europe or signing with an MLS club. The Revs were stuck between those. The Revs signed was stuck between, I think, Celtic and I forget the Fulham maybe. Now I'm just reaching out for clubs here, but what were they going to do, right? So it's a real interesting discussion. Armand, last point.
Well, I just want to go back to this point real quick. I think the way that we look at relegation and promotion in this country at this stage is playoffs. I think it's, do you make the playoffs or not? And that's where the pressure comes. And I know we can say relegation isn't, it's not here, but making the playoffs is a real thing. And, owners have expectations. They want to make playoffs. They want to, be involved in that, postseason, whatever, get the money from the tournament, the postseason tournament as well. And, make it, because that's the level, that's our litmus test for success in MLS. It's not getting promoted or relegated. It's, are you going to be one of the 12 teams out of 20 or 14 teams out of 24 to make the playoffs? Jeez, that's a terrible number. It's really, that's a really interesting debate that you could have right there. The thing is, and I'm gonna I guess circle back to my initial point, is that I don't think we're gonna see the players reach their fruition to be at that level to compete for a championship because they're being plucked away for, I guess, prices that MLS teams will take. You're gonna take $1.5 million for Chris Richards at FC Dallas, especially when you're balling on a budget. That's great numbers for you. And the thing is, the thing I would like to see is if a guy like George Bello, which I know is one of Joseph's favorite little homegrown players, if a guy like George Bello can break into Atlanta, now all of a sudden you kind of have a situation, and maybe an Andrew Carlton if he's not partying before the MLS Cup, you're gonna have a situation where you have some homegrown spending, and I hate to be that moderate, but if we can get that hybrid of both,
well, now we're Armand, you're making way too much sense for MLS and MLS executives. They're not going to listen.
Now we're talking about
you have hit the sunlight in platonic terms.
Now we're hitting it, but I think teams are more extreme at this stage. We want to save as much money as we can and develop our own talent, like the Rapids are trying to do, like FC Dallas is, like
Red Bulls.
Red Bulls is more towards that moderate. You spend $7 million on Kaku, even though he was kind of boo boo for the last half of the season, he's still $7 million signing. I'm forgetting a team, Union. There we go, the Union.
Well,
there's more these guys, those guys. So
you're making way too much sense for
sorry, man.
MLS.
Sorry. Hey, hire me as a GM. I'll pick all your GAs. I'll implement the academy and make you spend your money. Come on, owners, hire me.
Joseph, we want to give you the opportunity to plug where we can find your work, your Twitter, anything else you wanted to plug here. on Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. Go ahead.
I appreciate that. Yeah, you can find me some my written work for The Athletic, or if you really like reading mediocre to average tweets, you can follow me on Twitter at Joe and Cleats. And if I have any written work for anybody else, you'll see it there. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. Tune in tomorrow for another episode. At the end of the week, the full episode will be put together. So if you miss any of the segments, don't want to go back, you can just wait for the full one. Till next time.